My name is Lisa Higgins, and I'm the director of the Missouri Folk Arts Program, and I am here with Angela Williams, master storyteller in the Traditional Arts Apprenticeship Program and a former apprentice. And we're doing one of our Then and Now Apprentice Journeys interviews. We started Then and Now in 2016, the year after our 30th anniversary. And during that 30th anniversary, we worked a lot with master artists who've been in the program over the entire tenure of the project, really, and then realized that we didn't have a lot of apprentice stories. But apprentices are hard to keep up with. Sometimes they're young, they go away to college, they get married, they change their names, they move away, so it's hard to keep track of them. But we were able to keep track of the ones who have made the great accomplishment, like you have, of graduating from being apprentices to being master artists. So we thought that would be a good way to gather some stories about the apprenticeships. So now here we are, and this will be the 5th year that we've done these recordings, right? Yeah, do my math in my head again. And so we invited Angela Williams to join us today, and you are a master artist just this year in our 2021 program. Mm-hmm. And you've been working over the last several months with Cynthia McPherson, mm-hmm. right? Let's see, we'll do the official stats here. In 2003 and 2004, you were an apprentice to Gladys Caines Coggswell. Mm-hmm. And that's when you were still in Hannibal, and she was over not too far away in Frankfort, mm-hmm. right? Yes. And now you've relocated here to Kansas City, mm-hmm. and you're teaching.
Yes.
And applied back in the fall with Cynthia, mm-hmm. and were accepted into the program for 2021. So we'll ask you some questions about your apprenticeship with Gladys and then your apprenticeship with Cynthia.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so the first question is, what motivated you to learn to be a storyteller?
All right. Dr. Cogswell motivated me to be a storyteller. I remember that I didn't think I could do anything, but she could see something in me that no one else could see, not even myself. Mm-hmm. She used to come to my school at Oakwood Elementary and tell stories when I was in 2nd grade. And I remember her just singing, and her hands and the stories she told just captivated all my classmates and the teachers as well. And then I met her again. I seen her again at the Fannie Griffin Art Club, mm-hmm. and then she would tell stories at the Folklife Festival downtown in Hannibal. Mm-hmm. And my mother would take me down there and said, "Let's go see Miss Gladys tell stories." Mm-hmm. And there was a large crowd somewhere on Main Street, and I was walking up, and she was telling her stories. The audience was playing and clapping, mm-hmm. and she said, "I need some volunteers." And I stopped at the back of the crowd. And do you know she called my name? "Angela, do you want to be a volunteer?" My heart started beating real fast. And I said, no. And she just smiled at me, and she called somebody else. I knew deep down inside that I really didn't want to go up there, but I just didn't know how. I didn't know how I could, because I was so shy and very bashful, but she just, everywhere I seen her when I was young, she would always make eye contact with me. She would always see me, recognize me, and say something positive to me. I was drawn to stories ever since I was a little girl. When I was in church, I would really pay attention to the stories in Sunday school. When the preachers told stories in their sermon, I would really listen. When my parents stayed home from church and made my brothers and I go, I couldn't wait to come back and tell them what happened from the beginning to the end. When I was a teenager, I wanted so bad to say something, but didn't know how because I was too shy. I didn't think my voice was good enough. And I gravitated towards music. And I began to listen to the songs, pick gospel songs out. And I would really, really study the words, study what the singer was trying to say, and I began to lip sync in church. I would do this at family reunions. I would do this at other engagements that people asked me to go to. And people, we would take a CD or something and put it in a loud stereo because it had to be really loud, so I could convince people. And I was so good at it and so animated, and so I had a lot of convictions when I sung the song, lip sang the song, that people actually thought I was singing. And they would get up and they would throw their hands up, they would shout, they would cry, they would really be moved. And I was asked to lip sing at a Juneteenth festival in Hannibal, Missouri in 2002. And Dr. Coggswell was the mistress of ceremony. And after I finished, she came up to me and she congratulated me and told me how well I did. Well, a couple weeks later, I heard a message on the answer machine, and it was Dr. Coggswell, and she asked me to be her apprentice, to a storytelling apprentice. And I immediately said, oh my goodness, how could she ask me? I can't even really talk. I'm so shy. How could she ask me? And I ignored the message, thinking that she would not call again or she would forget, because I knew she was very busy telling stories. But she called again, and I let it go to the voicemail or the answer machine. And my mother said, you haven't called Miss Gladys back. You need to call her right now. And so I did, and I couldn't tell her no, and I accepted. So as the apprentice started, she learned that I was very, very shy. And she laughs at the thought that I had to go into a private room to even record my story, to even apply for the apprenticeship program. But Dr. Coggswell was very patient with me. She actually listened to me. She let me get my words out. She laughed when I would talk about something, that experience that happened to me. She would ask me my opinion. And I don't really remember a lot of people being patient enough to really listen to me. And she gave me the space, and she let me feel safe to mess up. She let me feel safe to really grow. And every time that I told stories, she would laugh or she would congratulate me. She would tell me how well I did, and that just gave me the confidence. She was very contagious. Like, she loved storytelling. She had joy when she told stories, and it was contagious. And I was hooked. But one day after a lesson, she stopped me before I left her house, because we would have our story sessions, meetings at her house or my house and things. But I remember that she stopped me before I left, and she looked real serious. And she looked at me and she said, Angela, I'm not going to be alive very long. And I need somebody to carry on storytelling, and it's going to be you. And I got real sad. I was really enjoying my time with Dr. Coggswell. And I was learning so much and just growing as a person. And I went home to my mother. I said, Mom, I said, have you heard if Miss Gladys is dying, or she's not feeling well? Does she have cancer? And I thought, since my mom was a beautician, all the gospel went through the beauty salon. She said, no, I haven't heard anything. And do you know that was 18 years ago? And she's still here. She's still going.
Here. Kicking. All right. Great answer. All right. So as this happens, and you've already read the questions, of course, and it's always happens, so you've anticipated, but I'm still going to ask all the questions. Okay. But some of your answer, follows later. Yeah. So then the next question is to tell us about the apprenticeship itself. The story sessions, you called it. And then also, and I think you've answered this too, but answer it again if you want, the most important thing you learned as an apprentice in 2003, because you did 2 apprenticeships, 2003 and 2004. Those are rare, to be able to do 2 in a row with the same apprentice. I will say in the application, has to really be compelling, because a panel reviews those applications, and it can be competitive, whether there's a lot of applications or there's never enough funding for all of the applications. And so you all had a compelling argument to do it the second time. So in the following year. So the question, tell us about the apprenticeship, and then what was the most important thing that you learned?
Okay. It's very difficult to pick one of the most important things, because I think I was challenging. To be a shy storyteller, I don't think it quite worked. So it doesn't matter how big or small it was. Everything that she did, I felt like it was done with a purpose, because I had to be comfortable. But I learned so much, and I was an observer, and I watched her, how she tackled a story, how she told me stories to ease and calm my nerves. When I told her I was too shy to get in front of people, she would tell me a story about when she was shy. And I thought, well, if she's shy, she's so great, then I can be great too. And she just knew exactly how to handle me. One of the best things that I think, she exposed me to her telling. And I remember going to my Oakwood Elementary School and watching her tell stories. It was amazing to see her and being at school, 19 and 20 years old, listening to her tell stories and watching how the students reacted to her. She had, I still remember her stories, how she put on a paper bag to tell a story and demonstrate the stories, and the kids just loved it. It just gave me a great example of what good storytelling is, what great storytelling is. She let me travel with her. We attended workshops. She took me to the library. We read books. She pointed out the 398.2 section and told me what stories I could tell. She talked to me about copyright, how to create and make stories my own, how not to tell a story if I don't feel it. But one of the best experiences I think that she gave me was the second year of our apprenticeship. She asked me to go with her to Jonesboro, Tennessee. She was a storyteller in residence at the International Storytelling Center. And I saw what it took to be a storyteller of her caliber. I saw how many stories, I saw how she studied, I saw how she was so nervous. One time, she was going to be videotaped, and she was so nervous. And I identified because I was always shy and nervous too. But I couldn't believe she was so nervous. I mean, I've heard her, but she was always humble like that. And she had said, Angela, what stories do I tell? What should I tell? I have to tell for a whole hour. And so we got there, and we got on the elevator, and we were going up, and some other women got on there. And we were standing there, going up the elevator, and the lady said, have you heard that Gladys Caines tell stories? Is she any good? And I stood there, and I looked at Dr. Coggswell, and I didn't say nothing. And Dr. Coggswell said, I don't know. And so we went on in there, and I sat down in the back, and she went to the front, and the person got up and introduced her. And when she got up, all those ladies that were in the elevator said, oh! And it was just a great moment. It taught me how just to be free. And she got up and told stories. And she actually told more. She almost told 2 hours, and she was only supposed to tell an hour. So just when she got up there, she was just, and I just was able to observe that. And towards the end of the residency, she told me that I had to meet Jackie Torrance. I didn't know who Jackie Torrance was. I didn't think no one was as good as Dr. Coggswell. But I just went on and took her word for it, and we decided to drive all the way to North Carolina, which is about three hours away from Jonesboro. And I got to meet Jackie Torrance, and we took pictures with her. We sat and listened to stories. Dr. Coggswell purchased 2 paintings that she painted, and we went into a room where Jackie had all kinds of books on each wall. And I was just amazed that she had collected all those books. But Dr. Coggswell told me that if you're going to be a storyteller, you have to have all the information and resources for you to learn your craft. And so, fast forward to October 2004, Dr. Coggswell asked me if I wanted to go back to Jonesboro for the festival. She had always talked about this festival. She said thousands and thousands of people go to Jonesboro on the first weekend in October, and you have to experience it. And she told us that we was actually going to take care of Jackie Torrance because Jackie was in a wheelchair. And she said her friend, another storytelling friend, Diane Follett, was going to go, and the three of us was going to help take care of Jackie. And I said, okay. As soon as we checked in, it was the most incredible experience. I sat there. Seemed like as soon as we walked in, they started telling stories. Jackie told a story. Diane told a story. Dr. Coggswell told a story, and I was just going back and forth listening. And they just loved it, you know. I mean, they didn't run out of stories. I mean, we never turned on the TV. We went to sleep, tired, you know, just exhausted and just full of stories. Well, I still didn't really understand who Jackie was. Not really. But I noticed that when we would come back to the hotel from going to the festival, people say, "Do you need help? Do you need help?" It's like they was trying to beg to get into that room. And then they announced that Jackie was going to tell a story on a Saturday. It was just out of the spur of the moment. And the word went fast. As we went down the streets walking, pushing Jackie in the wheelchair, people would go by and say, "Is that Jackie? Is that Jackie Torrance? Oh my God, it's Jackie." And I said, "Who is this woman?" You know, I heard stories, but I mean, it was just good stories that I've heard, you know, at family reunions and things. And Saturday came, and people were running to the tent. I mean, it was a large tent that held hundreds, and it was full. People were outside, standing all around the tent, and they rode Jackie up on the ramp. And oh my goodness, when I heard her tell those stories, it was the most magical feeling that I've ever heard in my life. And as we were going back home, I realized how special it was for me to have that experience, to learn from some of the greatest storytellers. And Dr. Coggswell gave me that opportunity. So that was just a peek of what she did and how our apprenticeship went. When I got a job, she would always be there to support me and guide me and encourage me.
That's a great answer.
Thank you.
I think, I'm guessing, but you may prove me wrong, was the most challenging aspect of your apprenticeship experience?
Overcoming my shyness and believing in myself. I mean, she really opened me up. She pushed me. She knew when to push me, and she knew when to pull back. Because she would help me fill out forms. She helped me with everything and made sure that I had the tools to succeed. And I believe during my second year of the apprenticeship, she asked me, she said, "Angela, do you want to be a featured teller at the St. Charles Storytelling Festival?" And I said, "Oh, no, I'm not ready." She said, "Yes, you are. You got plenty of stories. You're going to be great." And I said, "Oh, no, I'm not." She said, "Well, it's too late. You're already hired." And I said, "Oh, goodness." Well, I ended up doing pretty good. The first couple of days, there's nice little crowds we went. You know, it was great to be around other storytellers. I was very sheltered as a child, so for me to go down there and drive, because I think she had a job somewhere in another town, but she was always on the phone to guide me, and she was always there. But the last night of the festival, the featured tellers had to tell a story. And the crowds had been fairly nice, but when I walked in that night, it was packed from wall to wall. And I saw all those people. My mother was there, my grandmother was there, and they called me up. And I walked up there to tell my story. And I started to focus on the people, and I tried to breathe, and I tried to get myself ready, and I began to tell my stories. About 10 words in, I went blank. And I couldn't remember nothing. And I saw all those eyeballs looking at me, and I didn't know what to do. And I looked at Dr. Coggswell, and she just smiled like I didn't even stop. And just her words and the story she used to tell, why the eagle has a bald head, that those words of those stories and the meaning of that story, where she intertwines her personal experience with a folktale. And she tells me, if you worry about people and what they think, and you won't have time to figure out what's inside of you, you're gonna stop your gift. And I looked at her, I remember those words very quickly. I pulled myself together, and I restarted the story, and I finished strong. And when she came up, she said, "Oh, you did so good." I said, "How could I?" She goes, "I couldn't tell. You finished the story." And my grandmother said, "Angela, you were the best one." And it encouraged me. But I knew that I had trouble. That I could have trouble again if there were large audiences, because I could get in my head. So I decided to buy a djembe drum. And I found a song, a folktale song, that I could play and sing before I started my stories. And that seemed to work. And it gave me the peace and the things that I needed before I went into my storytelling program.
All right. So then, what did you learn about teaching during your time as an apprentice?
What I learned about teaching was that I had to be patient. I had to listen. I had to encourage. And believe and activate the belief in someone. And those are the things I knew that I had to teach. I learned about marketing yourself, brochures, and how to write. Because storytelling is more than sharing a story. By observing Dr. Coggswell, I knew that you have to connect with people, not only during storytelling, but even after. To be able to get jobs, you have to connect with people. And that's one thing that I admired about her. Dr. Coggswell has had storytelling relationships for over 30 plus years. People that continue to hire her because she always was at her best self. And she always bought something new and fresh. And so those were things that I knew and I learned that I had to teach by watching her.
We'll shift gears.
Okay.
That was the transitional question, right? From being the apprentice to being the master artist.
Okay.
So now I want you to tell us a little bit, and let me just preface this by saying that your apprenticeship, you submitted an application last August, you and Cynthia McPherson, and the panel reviewed it in September. You got notification, started teaching, working together about October or so. In 2020, during the pandemic.
Yes.
So this is a very different situation, which is one of the reasons I want to kind of preface that. I know I'm sure you'll talk about that, but I just want to set the stage a little bit. So tell us about that apprenticeship with Cynthia McPherson, and then what's the most important thing you taught that you think you taught Cynthia?
All right. Well, I met Cynthia McPherson my first year teaching in Kansas City, Missouri, in the Hickman Mill School District. Our second year, she shared a room with me due to limited space. So after the weekends, as we asked each other how it went, I would tell her about my storytelling performance or event that I went to. And she would tell me stories about when she went home to take care of her parents.
Mm.
Her mother had not autism, Alzheimer's, thank you. And her father was a Tuskegee Airman, and he was in his 90s. And I just began to learn that she had a rich heritage.
Mm-hmm.
Her grandfather, her father's dad, was a principal of the school in Tipton, Missouri. And as she began to tell me about herself and the way she told about her mother, she had like this little dry humor, and I was just laughing. I mean, I wasn't supposed to laugh, but it's just the way she expressed herself. I said, "Do you want to be a storyteller?" And she said, "Yes." And so in 2020, I asked her to be, and she still was interested. Mm-hmm. So I said, "Well, I believe I'm ready." Since 2003, it took me to 2020 to find, after Dr. Coggswell had pushed me, I finally felt like I was ready. And I had, when I was asked if, will I be doing it in person or will you want to do it virtual? I said, well, we can do virtual. Because I did have a little experience because I was teaching remotely with my class. Mm-hmm. So I knew a little bit about Zoom. And then I began to think, how can I present storytelling to her and get the stories out of her like Dr. Coggswell and I did. You know, a lot of our lessons was around the kitchen table, just talking and reading stories and, you know, retelling them in our own way and just, you know, things like that. And so I said, well, Zoom should be okay for us to, you know, talk. I mean, we began to laugh and talk. And it kind of felt like we were at the kitchen table. So I said, okay, fine. So that went good. We engaged in storytelling. I wanted to know, I asked her questions to pull the story out of her about her family, our family history. Like, she knew her father was a Tuskegee Airman, but as I asked her questions, it began to pull more and more out. She was able to find more connections with her past. And I don't think she would have really figured that out if not for the apprenticeship program. So I try to think of ways to give her different voices. I invited her to the St. Louis Storytelling Festival, to the NABS Festival, the National Black Association of Storytellers, to the Kansas City Storytelling Celebration. All of it was virtual. Right. So I would send her, email her stuff, and she would just come and she would listen. Our class, we would discuss it. I would send her stories, find out what type of stories she liked, and she loved the trickster stories. So I would send her all. I would get all of the books that we had in the house and make copies. I would mail her tapes and CDs for her to listen to other storytellers. We would discuss it, and then pretty soon she began to ask me, "Have you heard this story? Have you heard this story? I like this story." She was like a sponge. She soaked up everything. I think the most important thing that I was able to teach her was to connect with the story, to feel the story, and to tell it. We practice and practice and practice. And I was just thankful that she was my first storyteller, and I had a great experience, even during the pandemic.
Yeah. And I'll say it as a bit of an aside that doesn't necessarily need to show up in here, but I don't want to forget that Lisa Overholzer, who's the director of the St. Louis Storytelling Festival and a folklorist, did an evaluation of your team. And everything you just said in that last answer resonates with the report that she wrote. She was very impressed how well you all met the challenge of, an apprenticeship, a storytelling apprenticeship over Zoom during the pandemic. And you mentioned earlier, Gladys had told you, you got to feel the story. And that was a quote that Lisa Overholzer had included from Cynthia in her evaluation. So
great.
that thread is running through for 18, 19, 20, yeah,
yes.
We're getting there. Many years. All right, you may be happy about this. This is the last question.
Okay. We're making it.
bittersweet feelings, right? So what does the master artist apprentice relationship mean to you? It's two parts, then and now.
Okay. Well, the
Master artist apprentice so the relationship between the two artists, what did it mean to you then and what does it mean to you now?
It means everything to me then, and it means everything to me now. It's almost like full circle. Back then, 2003 and 4, I was just really getting to know myself. I had just graduated from college. I was pregnant, no one knew. And there was a lot of things going on. And storytelling and Dr. Coggswell just met me it was almost like God sent. And she guided me. She didn't let me be sad or be discouraged, but her stories really uplifted me.
Mm-hmm.
She did more than I think that was called of her as far as a master artist. After we finished our residency, when we was headed back, she's like, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know." She goes, "Well, you should go back to school. You should go to college."
Mm-hmm.
I said, I don't know how. I was still bashful, I was still shy.
Mm-hmm.
She said, "Well, I will take you." And a lot of times when people tell you something, they sometimes don't follow through. They don't. I've come across it a lot in my life. But Dr. Coggswell was not like anybody else. As soon as we got back and got settled, she called me up and said, "You ready to go?" And I said, "Sure." And she took me to John Wood Community. She enrolled me there and she helped me. She would spend after we finished our lesson, she would say, "Okay, what homework do you have?" And she would help me write my English papers and help me with my math. She would not only encourage me in storytelling, but encourage me in my academics. I ended up graduating from John Wood, and I still remember her sitting in the audience. She was crying. She encouraged me to go to Hairston State University, where I got my bachelor's in elementary education.
Mm-hmm.
She was right there, and she was crying. So she's been more than a storyteller to me. In 2005, she had a stroke.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't know what a stroke was.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't. And when I heard, I went to the Hannibal Regional Hospital. When I opened the door to her room, and she was sitting in the hospital bed, and when she saw me, her face lit up like it did when I was coming to her house to do stories. And she looked at me and she said, "Hi." And I said, I didn't know what was wrong with her voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "That's the storyteller that's been, singing and telling." And, I just didn't know. But I knew that it was going to be a tough road for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt compelled, just like she was helping me at night and helping me with storytelling, went beyond the duty. I felt like I needed to do the same for her and help her get through. So I was with her when OT, PT, when she went back home, I was with her. I would help her. And when she had jobs, I would encourage her. Because when you're high like that, going, traveling from state to state, been to China, and then you have to work to get your words out. One side of her body was partially paralyzed. And sometimes she couldn't even sit up by herself. And when she got jobs to continue to take care of her house, she needed help. And so everything that she poured inside of me, I was able to help her, but also continue to learn what it really meant to research, what it took, the discipline to actually to memorize new material, to be effective in. It was almost like if she had not poured all the things and was unselfish and poured into me, then I wouldn't have been able to really help her. And I continue to grow. And so we've continued to work together. When she was hired at the St. Louis Storyteller Festival, I was hired too, and I was there to help her and get her there. A lot of people don't have patience, for someone who walks, slower or things like that. So from then to now, I'm still learning from one of the greatest storytellers. Mm-hmm. And now that I've been able to work with Cynthia McPherson, I realized that everything that all the suffering of me trying to tell stories and all the work that she did was not in vain. Mm. And I'm more confident. I'm more, I believe in myself. I'm a better speaker. And I owe it all to Dr. Coggswell. And a lot of the things that she taught me, I'm continuing to pass it on to others so they can pass it on to others. And document stories from my family, from generation to generation. One of the first stories that she helped me with was a story of the funeral. Mm-hmm. I believe that's what we applied for with the apprenticeship program. And I didn't know why she thought that was a good story. Because when I tell you that I was scared of dead people, I was scared of that funeral home. It was the worst experience I had had in my life, and I had dealt with it. But as I realized today that when I have been telling that story for 18, 19 years. And through that story, there was healing. Because my father passed away May 2020 during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't know if he was going to have a funeral and have the homegoing that he had given to so many other families. And that was a hard pill to swallow. Mm-hmm. A lot of people wasn't coming around, and my father always told me to get as many trays as you can because you never know what the economy might do. And the year he died, we was in the pandemic. And I was a cosmetologist as well, because I learned under my mother. I was her apprentice.
Right.
So he encouraged it to have as many trays as you can because and a lot of people didn't have incomes during the pandemic, and I was just so thankful that I was an educator because I continue to be able to have an income to help support myself. Well, going back to him, he was gone, and I didn't know if he was going to be looking nice or if his hair was going to be cut. And I said, well, can I do it? I can't have my dad go out like that. And strength had went inside me, and there he was laying in the spot where I was so afraid of going, but I had to go for him. And I can hear him. The dead people can't hurt you. It's the people living that you need to worry about. And that's one of the most important parts of that funeral home story. And as I walked into that embalming room where he was laying, I heard his voice edging me on, and I was able to cut his hair. I was able to touch his cold body. And if I had not listened to Dr. Coggswell and wrote that story, the healing process that occurred during telling that story over and over. And the stories evolve and change as you grow as a person. And the story has changed the shape and form, and it's been added to and things. But I am grateful for the time from then to now, and I'm grateful for the growth. And I'm thankful for and grateful for the TAPS program. For you, Dr. Lisa Higgins, and Debbie Bailey, and of course Dr. Coggswell, for encouraging me and believing in me and putting me in positions to succeed. And I really appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
We get a lot out of that.
When I was about 3 or 4 years old, my family and I decided to move into this big white 12-room house. Now this house served as our home. It also served as my father's funeral home. It is also the place where my connection with ghosts and fairy began. Did I say fear? Well, that is an understatement. I was horrified. And when you are horrified at the age of 3 or even 4, you just might wet the bed at night or in the daytime too. Well, I'm sad to say that I did both. Well, let me tell you a little bit about this funeral home. We lived upstairs and my father operated his business downstairs. And there were these big red drapes that was at the end of the steps. Well, one night, it was cold, and I knew if I went to bed, I would be even colder. So I decided to wake up my sister, Jackie. Psst, psst, Jackie, will you help me go downstairs and use the restroom? My sister was so sweet, she got up, and she held my little hand, and we went down those steps and got to those big, large red drapes. She was just about to walk through. I said, wait. I stuck my little fingers inside the drapes. I looked to the left, then I looked to the right. I didn't see anything, so I started to walk through the drapes. And pretty soon I felt some chills go through my body. And I saw an image and I said, please don't take me. I'm not ready to go. Please, I'm too young. And the light came on. And it was my father. He said, child, what's wrong with you? I said, I thought you was a ghost. I thought I was about to die. He said, child, you stop that crying. Don't you know that dead people can't hurt you? It's the people living that you need to worry about. I didn't know what he was talking about. And I know I didn't have to use the bathroom anymore because there was a puddle between my legs. And I didn't try that anymore, and I went upstairs. Well, there was another time. It was in the daytime. And I needed something. And since it was daytime, I decided to go down those steps by myself. I knew my father was downstairs. And I got to those long red drapes. And I stuck my little fingers through the drapes and I looked to the left. And I looked over to my right. Over there to my right, there was a casket laying out there. I knew my father was getting ready for a funeral. There was a man inside the casket. There was something strange happening to him. His stomach was moving up and down, up and down. The man was breathing. I said, Daddy, please come in here. Look, the man's alive. He's alive. Call his family. Tell them they don't have to cry no more. Tell them he's alive. Look, Daddy, look. My father came walking in from his office. He looked down at me. He looked at the man. He looked down at me, saw that I was serious. Now, my father was a man of faith. And he heard the stories in the Bible about Lazarus rising 3 days after he was dead. And he said, well, maybe it's my time to have a miracle. So he took his hand, he placed it over the man's stomach, raised it up a little higher, went to the man's chest. Then he took his index finger and placed it under the man's nose to see if he could feel any air coming out of his nose. Then he looked down at me and said, Angelo, yeah, Daddy, you gonna call family? He said, no, this man is very much dead. Remember what I told you. It's the people living that you need to worry about. Dead people can't hurt you. And he said, now, Angela, have you ever seen a dead man hit you upside your head? I said, He said, Angela, has a dead person ever robbed or stole anything from you? I said, no. He said, that's right. The dead people can't hurt you. It's the people living that you need to worry about. Well, I heard what he said, but I knew deep down in my heart that that man was still alive. I sat on the steps with the drapes closed, and I heard the man's family come in. I heard the organist come in, and it tuned up. The person who sings came up and sang the song. The soloist said, "One glad morning, when this life is over, I'll fly away." I said, he doesn't have to fly away because he's alive. I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. I knew in my heart that that man was alive, but I heard as the pallbearers took him out, put him in the hearse. I knew they were going to the Robinson Cemetery. You know, my connection with ghosts and fear did not stop. It got worse and worse. My mother became worried. She came to my father one day. She said, "Rodney, we're going to have to move out of this house. Angela's going to go crazy." He said, "Oh, she'll be okay." But I wasn't. When we would drive past the cemetery, I would duck and hide all the way underneath the glove compartment in our car until we was way past it. I would begin to tell my father, "Daddy, you about to get a death call." He looked at me, and you know, less than 5 minutes somebody would call and tell him to go to the Hannibal Regional Hospital and pick up somebody. He started looking at me. He started listening to my mother. Oh, and he had to buy lots and lots of mattresses. Well, my mother finally convinced my father to move out of that funeral home. And do you know, I never went to bed in the daytime or night again. I've never complained of seeing ghosts. So, if you're ever traveling down Highway 61 and you are going to Hannibal, and you come to the intersection of Highway 61 and MM, my father still owns that funeral home. You'll see a service station on your right and on your left. You'll see a Casano's restaurant. Then you'll see a Hardee's restaurant. Above Hardee's is where my father's funeral home sits. I want you to make a left turn. After you pass Hardee's, I want you to drive up that hill, preferably at night. And I want you to drive up and park behind that funeral home. And boom, I bet you'll see a ghost too, and you'll get right out of there. And that's the story of the funeral home.